Alright, hello everyone, my name is Disc, and in this video we have a 24 Vortex Pinnacle, and for the week cycle we are Tyrannical, Incorporeal, and Spiteful. So I wish I could have gotten this key out sooner, it just hasn't happened, but I think on a Tyrannical week is a better example of this key. I think the Fortified week is a little bit easier, the Tyrannical side is quite a little bit more particular. So as always, let's flash talents before we go. It is really important to take Maths Dispel here, and that is for the first couple of trash pulls only, really, but you do need it. And often overlooked, Body and Soul. I try and run this whenever I can. It's more of just like, I look at it as a defensive point for me. I don't think people often look at speed boost as being a defensive spell, but it kind of is. You know, if you think about Druid's Roar, it's defensive, and on the big dragon bird boss, Body and Soul is really great for switching sides and staying upwind of the dragon. And being that this is Tyrannical, I would say it's maybe second in line for difficulty on Tyrannical bosses. I am putting points, extra defensive points into Fade and Light's Inspiration. I really just don't think there's a better place to dump those points, and having a little bit of extra defensives is always nice. And recently I've macroed my Desperate Prayer and Fade together, so on the same button. So I either press it for the wall, or I'm pressing it outside of wall, and it kind of does the same thing with just less impact. I think that's a nice way to do it. And then over on the disc side, I think this build is really boring, but it just does so much more healing in moments where you need it. When it comes to Tyrannical, I'm pretty much always running for Aegis and Improved Rapture. Unless it's something like an Underrot, I'm still running Mindbender, which I think is just so much more fun. And a lot of people I know are running Will and Woe. I've toyed with it some, but I just really prefer the Aegis Wrath with Improved Rapture when I need healing. And I think that's totally okay because I'm maximizing it fully. And I do that with my Grid2. I can really monitor where my absorbs are, where they're depleted, whether it was a crit or not. And it's just, it's a really nice talent point to weave in between Shadow Covenant. So pretty much no matter where you go at the bottom, your Shadow Covenant will always be plenty of healing. The thing to think about though is, what am I going to do outside of Shadow Covenant? And with Improved Rapture, it really just amplifies your off Shadow Covenant windows and makes them quite a bit more substantial. I just think it's really nice. So just like food for thought, you'll Shadow Covenant Rapture, Shadow Covenant Barrier, things like that, just to kind of cycle back and forth. And then I also wanted to say, I think I mentioned it in my last video, but I have all of my my imports or my exports all updated. So on my Wago, all of my code for like KUI Nameplates and Grid2. So check those out if you want to see if there's anything changed. And then I know I have not made a video in a couple of weeks, and honestly I've just been taking a break from WoW. It is so discouraging, and I think part of my opinions are directed at the developers, sorry to say it, and in part is directed at the player base as well. So I think we all know by now Paladins have quite a bit of an advantage right now just when it comes to their numbers, and I think it is just so unfair, and I think that is a problem that the developers have created for the game. But then I also kind of cringe when I look at the player base when they don't want to take anyone but a Paladin because they think absolutely a Paladin means you have a better shot. And I don't agree with that at all. I know there's a lot of people that, live by that as their personal doctrine. And I don't think so. I think it always boils down to the player. I don't think a Paladin necessarily ever means you have a better shot. And a lot of people think that, and I just think it's kind of nearsighted. And it's kind of created this environment in the game where you're not getting invited unless you're a Paladin, and it's because of these like closed-minded mindsets. And it's been an environment where I can't win And, you know, I really like discipline. It's my name, for Pete's sake. And people will literally message me when I queue to a group and say, no one wants you, roll a paladin. And I just think that is so fucking egotistical and like rude, and just like, I bring so much to a group, and I think my 100 parse will always beat even a 90 parse from a paladin. So I think, you know, I still have value, and people just don't see it that way. And it's been a really discouraging environment to play in, so I've just really not been on much. But I'm looking forward to paladins getting nerfed. I don't really like, you know, using that word, even like nerfs and buffs. I think the developers always have a motive to balance the classes, and I think that has to be a hard task, but they're clearly really unbalanced now. And with all the YouTube videos that only focus on like dividing the community with like meta and non-meta, it's just been a miserable time in Warcraft for me. And, you know, that being said, I think more YouTube videos should focus on teaching people how to be their best at their chosen role, rather than only making videos about what's meta, what's not meta, which divides a community. I think it's terrible that that's what content creators make. Therefore, in turn, it's what consumers want. Therefore, it's what creators are making. So it's the cyclical thing where I think it's kind of dividing the community. And despite which classes are ahead of the pack right now due to unbalanced metrics, I still think it's better quality content to teach people how to be their best at a spec. And, you know, that's kind of been my motive here. I think everyone understands that I like discipline, and I would like to teach anyone else who's interested in discipline how to be their best. And with that being said, I think that's a perfect segue into the last thing I wanted to say here as an intro. If anyone has been on Wago lately, there is a new affiliated website. Not sure the affiliation, but it's called Medify.gg. It is a website geared around coaching for games. And I thought that'd be a really great place for me to kind of jump into. I really like teaching, and I think maybe teaching on a one-on-one basis is a better approach than these kind of blanket videos that I make. And I have kind of ventured in that direction in the past for free, but I think I would just really like to maybe get away from offering my services totally for free and have an outlet for people who want maybe one-on-one coaching with me to pay me for it. And I do make a little bit of money from AdSense on Google, but my AdSense has been broken, which is another reason I've not been making videos. So I'm just really eager to get over to that website, and it's not about the money. I just really like helping people with discipline, and I think that shows over the years I've had this channel. So anyway, I'm in the process of becoming a partner on the website right now. My profile is fully built out, but part of the process to become a partner is have people vouch for you. So I already have a couple vouches on my account, and I'm not going to get verified until I have more vouches. So I don't really ask my channel viewer base much often, but I do have an ask now. You know, if you've ever learned something from my channel, I'd really appreciate it if you would take the 1 minute it takes to go over to, I'll link it down in the comments, but it's medify.gg/@justdiscipline. And it takes just a minute. You say you check a box vouching for me, and you check a box saying I'm just here to support, or I'm here to get a lesson, and then you make an account and submit. And it really doesn't take but a second, and I'd really appreciate if anyone has an extra moment in their day to do that for me. I'm really eager to get going over there while it's a new website and there aren't any other disc priests teaching there yet. So please do that to help me out, and I would really, really appreciate it. And without further ado, let's go ahead and clip over to the key. This was a really good run, 24 Vortex Pinnacle. And I would say this was probably easily a 99 parse for me, if not 100 parse for DPS and healing. So we have a lot of good examples here of what's going on. And yeah, let's go ahead and clip over to the key. All right, so we are about to get going here. And off the top, I'm always trying to plan where my PIs are going to go. And it's between the Shaman and the Druid. So the Druid, I think, is a hard 3-minute cooldown timer, and the Shaman is like 145. I don't know. So it kind of just bounces between whoever is available when I'm available. I do think the best thing to do with PI is run it on cooldown, with some exceptions. And you'll notice I've moved my PI right under my tune. I found that I was dropping it too often. So I put it right there so I can never miss it.
4, 3,
and also for a key like
2,
this,
1.
I am running Rashok's Heart, which I bought for 200,000 gold. And I only run it for Vortex Pinnacle Tyrannical and Halls of Infusion Tyrannical. I don't run it other than that. And when it comes to Incorporeal, I'm running Shackle. Dominate Mind is just a gamble compared to Shackle, so I vote Shackle. And I do think our first pull here is a Lust. And the best thing you can do with those dots is remove them instantly to put your Dispel on cooldown, because there will be more. Yep, and right there you saw on my player frame, I had a dotted line coming from the targeted spell's weak armor. Great place to use a shield. Yeah, I went out to the Shaman. Pumping as much DPS as I can. Really focusing on keeping my dots up. And really focusing on getting that second Dark Reprimand as well. And you'll notice on any shade that is targeting me, I have a weak aura to glow their nameplate. I think that's kind of the best way to see which ones are on you and differentiate between threat and non-threat. And I do have a weak aura pack up for that, which includes all fixates. So the Vicious Clawmangle, the Spider and Underrot, the Blind Rage in Freehold. Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. And I think on that pull, I had 2 Shadow Covenants. So really want to run that on cooldown. Most pulls you only get 1. That was kind of a long pull where I got 2. And there was my Mass Dispel to remove that dot. So being that this is non-fortified, you can kind of just heal through the dot, but it is best to just remove it if you can. Looks like that one I'm just healing through. Yeah, so I think the way that went is, since I was in Shadow Covenant, I just threw a Radiance and healed through it, and that was fine. Yep, and I had my Dispel for that one when it went on me. Also, in between pulls like this, it's really nice to lead into the next group with a proc. So that's what I was doing right there with those shades. And also using mouse over macros for Shackle. I think that's the best way to do it. I don't use any mouse over macros except for on the affixes. This one and the other one, whatever the name is, I forgot the other one. But most of my healing, pretty much, well, all of my healing comes from mouse over clicking. Kind of the same concept as mouse over macros, but the activation comes from my mouse instead of my keyboard. Those dots I healed through. And I've talked about it before, and I think it's not something hard for people to grasp when it comes to key bindings by using your mouse. So all of my defensive and offensive heals come from my mouse. I think early on in anyone's WoW career, as you're developing a keybind system, you kind of start at button 1 and then you venture all the way outwards, and then you realize, oh, you can start using letters. And then I think you create this maze on your keyboard where you're using all these different keys that you have to search for, and your hand has to translate from one key to the next. Then you start making it even worse by putting shift in front of everything, so you have these like combo keybinds, and I think that's really, really hard. It was a long time ago that I started getting away from that for efficiency reasons, and it's really just what I promote when it comes to playing Disc Priest. So my goal is to always keep an enemy targeted And then my left hand, so there's two realms of input that you have to manage in WoW. One is movement and positioning, one is casting. When it comes to the biology of our brains, if we can compartmentalize those in different hemispheres of our brain, it's just going to give you the advantage. So my left hand is only movement on my keyboard, only WASD. 100% of my casting comes from my mouse. I never have to choose, do I have to move or do I have to cast? I never have to, there's never a competition between my fingers for what do I have to do. So that was kind of a rant, but looking at these nameplates, you'll see I'm tracking that attack. That is a weak R that tracks that timer. Really, really nice to see when it's coming, so you're prepared. And just to finish off that thought about putting keybinds and spells on your mouse. So the way I look at it is if I have spells on my keyboard, I have to literally move my hand around my keyboard before I can activate a spell. On my mouse, my buttons are always at my fingertips. I never have to move them or reposition them. All you do is press down to activate. And if anyone's wondering, I only use a standard 5-button mouse. 2 on top, 2 on my thumb, and middle click. 5-button mouse. I have all my spells, offensive and defensive. I just think it is much more efficient. You can get so many more actions per minute that way, which really matters as disc. Okay, so there's PI. I do prefer more of an aerial view on this fight. It helps me keep an eye on those orbs that are floating around. And this is a boss where we don't have quite enough time for a Shadow Covenant on pull. So I am holding my first Shadow Covenant until the first Cyclone Shield. And this is paired with Vampiric Embrace. There was a nice innervate from the Druid. So the Druid has my weak aura for Rapture. I've just not Raptured yet. So he is watching for my Raptures, and the best time for a Priest to get innervate is during Rapture. It is a huge mana dump for us, by far the most expensive cooldown we have in our book. Yeah, and in these in-between phases, I'm really just relying on Expiation and my normal attack spells, making sure I have a proc loaded. And without Vampiric Embrace this time, that means I need one other modifier to my Shadow Covenant, and it was Barrier. Radiance late. And in moments like that, when we're all stacked, you get so much more value out of Divine Star. You get the green aspect of the heal from the star itself, and the Atonement proc from the damage. And in this dungeon, we have actually pretty much all of our bosses kind of require you to stack at some point or another. So you get a lot of value at star if you're aiming it in the right place. Yeah, Vampiric Embrace again for this one. I hit my wall/fade macro. Activated fade only. Yeah, it just came available. Watch this, it's really sad. Watch the Shaman. So I'm watching for his Q. I really want to get one more round out here. And there's PI. There, and he's dead. He lost like 99.9% of the value there. It's a big rip. Radiance late, so that my atonements extend beyond the Shadow Covenant. Kind of makes your cooldown window just a little bit longer. It has a softer taper in a sense. This boss just about done. And I know I covered it in my last video, but I want to just mention it again since I thought of it. So Shadow Covenant, the icon, is not on my screen. So my Schism, which is in the middle, is a macro for cast Schism. Hashtag show tooltip Shadow Covenant. So they are separate keybinds. It's not a macro together, but it makes my Schism icon show the cooldown of Shadow Covenant. So Shadow Covenant is the longer of the spells. I'm not using them off sequence of each other. So I kind of just look at it as 2 spells equals my 1 cooldown, so I display them together. Yeah, whenever I can take an icon off my screen, I think that is valuable. And just food for thought when it comes to efficient keybinds. My Schism is shift mouse wheel forward, and I spam for Shadow Covenant as shift mouse wheel backwards. It flows really nicely. Yep, and in this pack, you'll notice the assassins are a darker red. That is my KUI nameplates, highlighting the better focus target. There's my first Rapture. There's a well-timed Innervate. Bravo to the Druid. And in looking at this back over, I could have done one thing better there. And being that I'm a Blood Elf, I should have ran into melee and used Arcane Torrent on all those shields. Someone else might have done it, I'm not sure. But yeah, the Druid was like, I don't think your weak R is working, man. I was like, well, I've just not Raptured yet. Okay, so I think with Shadow Fiend available, I opt to run him first, put him on cooldown. I lead with regular atonements, anticipating this attack. I have the cooldown timer on the nameplate. Shadow Fiend was precast, and here's my Shadow Covenant. PI, because this guy ain't no joke. And there was our Divine Star after we were stacked, getting maximum value from that. And now we have Barrier, I think, is coming next. And you'll notice, yeah, I just paint set myself for comfort too with these assassins coming in. So I always preach this, but with bigwigs, we want to disable as much as we can. So in a pull like this, even though there's multiple different types of attacks, the only one that matters is that Icy Buffet. Oh my god, Icy Buffet? I think it's called Buffet. I just had a brain fart for a second. But that's the only one that matters. So when it came to when I cast my barrier, I listened for the ding from bigwigs and cast my barrier during the cast bar. And that way you get maximum value out of the barrier. Getting my proc off of those shades. Opening with dots. Dispel quick. So in a pull like this, when it comes to dotting, is very, very important. We get so much of our damage and healing from dots. So I quickly count that we have 5 mobs. So I'll dot 3 and then go into my cooldown window. And then my first penance will dot the full group. Sometimes I'll dot penance and then fill in the dots. But I think that's less efficient, because sometimes you'll tab over to one that's already dotted and you accidentally redot and you lose a global. So I like to tab dot, tab dot, tab dot, and then use my penance to just fill in the last 2. Hope that made sense. And I think next we go for a quadruple assassin. If anyone knows, I think you can put your back to a wall. I've heard it. And I've tried it with failure, but I've seen other people do it with success. I don't know, but I think if you put your back to a wall, something happens. But non-fortified, I'm just pumping heals. And there is a PI. This is not a super threatening pull, but when it comes to maximizing PI, you just want to roll it. And the only thing I'm thinking of is between now and the big bird boss where we want PI, we have 2 minutes of time to kill, so it fits one more round of PI. And the Shaman made good use of it there. Yeah, looking at I wasn't looking too much at the damage overall, which is where I usually judge my preferred PI target. The Druid's doing better. I think the Shaman at this point is getting more of my PIs, but I do switch over to the Druid at some point. Yeah, and then this is really, really bad. If you look at the party, that is a 4 stack down there. So those attacks, it's not shared damage, Or is it? I think it just hits everybody. If someone knows, corrects me. But I think it's best if you don't stand with your party. Yeah, someone let me know if I'm wrong there. I don't think it's shared damage, so I think you're supposed to split up. Always good to search for and pick out double executes. Arguably more important when you're playing Mindbender, but that is still a ton of healing and a ton of DPS. When you can snipe those out, you're really just going to maximize your spec more and get so much more out of it. And KUI is so great at that. So most of my nameplates are a red color, and then they shift to white in execute range, so it's really clear when it's time to execute. Okay, so we have bird. So I do run Shadow Covenant on the top of the play, and then I use my Rapture at the first downburst. So just not lose value on Shadow Covenant, I run it early here, just getting the damage aspect of it. And things were a little bit out of control, so I walled there plus my Rapture. Never a bad idea on Tyrannical fights to wall early, because you'll get it again. And I have his wind change hooked to his nameplate. That's a really good way for me to track it. And with barrier, the best play here and in other bosses with movement is you want to play it right after a move. Yeah, this is spooky. So I do have Shadow Covenant here, and I do have Fiend out, so we are covered. But that was a tricky switch. And this is also where I take really good use of utility of Body and Soul. I don't really want to use a Feather because there's no HPS from that. And I don't need a full 5 seconds of speed boost, so I really just think Body and Soul is a little bit better. So with Bigwigs, I'm tracking that downburst really carefully. And I had my Shadow Covenant lined up perfectly for that one. Let's see, what do I do here? Okay, good, I wasn't caught in the red. Yeah. Looks like I'm struggling a little bit. I missed my... Okay, yeah, so wall and paints up. This was a bad one. Without those defensives, I would have died. And I go into my second Rapture. And when it comes to Rapture, pretty much always on Tyrannical, especially, it is a cooldown for yourself and your DPS. You don't really need to use it on the tank. And that's what I did there. I was just farming up shield values on the party minus the tank. And now that we are in execute range, we are totally Gucci. When it comes to these Tyrannical fights, it's really just a race to execute range. That was my health potion right there. So Shadow Word Death is really, really nice for the heals, but it still hurts you quite a bit, and if you're too low, you can kill yourself. It's happened to me more than once. Refresh dot before my expiation. And that was Bird. 146k. Pretty good. So Tyrannical fights are really all about using defensives properly. I think Body and Soul there is really great. Pain Sups, I think I use both on myself. And using Wall, using Fade, things like that really just help you get through fights like that and make it to that execute range where you can just pump so much more heals. Okay, so a group of 4, I dot 2. And I have to farm up my Harsh Discipline to at least a 3. And here's my Shadow Covenant. Lead with Mind Blast first always. It is the most valuable. That first Mind Blast procs my first Dark Reprimand. And then the rest just kind of falls into place. And you'll see that crushing AoE attack. I have that on the Caliph's nameplate as well. So the reason I do that is Bigwigs doesn't show timers like that for trash pulls. So when we're on a boss fight, it's really easy to track timers and really easy to prepare your heals and get ahead of damage. But on trash pulls, Bigwigs does not do that. So I have to use the weak aura that tracks enemy cooldowns. By default, kind of like Bigwigs, every spell in the game is enabled. I don't think that is a good use of the weak aura or add-on. I would actually say I think that's a bad use. And I've whittled it down. I've eliminated just about everything except these handful of key spells. And most of my dungeons only have one spell enabled. This is kind of a one-off dungeon where I have, I think, 3 enabled. Oh yeah, so that's another, I think my favorite change to my UI thus far in all my years of WoW. I have my aggro indicator with KUI nameplates as a pink color. I just think it is so cute. Oh, and also, so with Incorporeal, I need to check if there's an update to it, but there's a really badass weak aura. Actually, I almost died, I stepped out too soon. A really badass weak aura. So if 2 pop up, well, whenever they pop up, they will have a glow on their nameplate, kind of like my shade right there, and the glow will remove once they are CC'd. So in a pug environment, it's a really nice way to kind of coordinate on the fly and not overlap your CC. It's not my weak aura. I found it on Wago. Any of these add-ons are weak auras I mentioned. They're really easy to find. So in a pack like this, I try and flash heal throughout so I get my 10% DR. And I'm kind of, even though they die quickly, I'm trying to get my Mind Blast out. And I'm trying to pick out deaths as well. So that's a really nice boost of healing. And for this next group, I open with a dot and a penance. And straight into Rapture while the party is still at full health. This is a proactive type of cooldown. And then I refresh the shields, which covers the next slam. And then now is Shadow Covenant. Spreading my dots, ramping my Harsh Discipline to a 3. Schism, Shadow Covenant. Mind Blast first. My first Dark Reprimand proc second. Really important to place Death early in your rotation, that way you get it again. A mistake I see a lot in... Oh yeah, right there. Picking out execute ranges was really nice for recovering health. But a mistake I see a lot when I watch other Disc Priests is they don't play Death early enough in their cooldown to get 2. So Shadow Covenant is a 15-second cooldown. Shadow Word Death is a 10-second cooldown. You should get 2, if not 4. So in this pack, I'm dot. I penance to spread my dot. And I waited for the ding from my Bigwigs and place my barrier late to get maximum value. And you might have to replay that to see, but all of these spells in Bigwigs are disabled. They're alerts. The only alert Bigwigs is going to give me is that AoE attack. That is the only one that matters. And I used that to get maximum value off my barrier, and it just barely covered both, I believe. Yeah, so if you play that back again, you hear the ding from Bigwigs, and I lay the barrier as late as I can right on the party. And right now my wall is used, my barrier is used, but it's always a good idea if you can to give yourself a single shield. There's never a reason as a Disc Priest you can't have a defensive running on yourself, because you always have a shield and you can always pick yourself. And right here, as a Disc Priest, there is no reason you should ever take fall damage. So I have Jump as spacebar and an @player Levitate as Shift spacebar. Really nice. I'm spraying a couple dots, getting my atonements out, putting Mind Blasts on cooldown. I ran Star just for the damage. And then I'm searching for Shadow or Death execute ranges. And we're golden. So the only thing you have to do here, even as the healer, is hard switch to the ad when it comes up, and you'll see what a hard switch looks like. Can't be lazy with it. On Tyrannical, it can really fuck you up. So I only track Skyfall Nova with my bigwigs, and I am reserving Shadow Covenant for that. And right here, that dotted line is the targeted casts weak aura. A really great place to shield and then also pre-cast a flash heal. Great place to drop PI2, get this guy out of the way. And also a really nice place to pick up extra heals and damage. Getting executes on those stars. Really great way to recuperate health. And I've had problems with this in the past, I'm sure we've all been there. But that static cling, I have a timer pull up right on top of my tune. It has a red, yellow, green as kind of like a timing system. And I've made it a pretty decent size so I can kind of just like cross my eyes and zone in on it. And make sure I jump at the right time. Yeah, and I don't know what's going on here, but for some reason I didn't play any cooldown. Not even my Shadow Covenant. Yeah, so I would say if you watch that back, this was all my bad. We got a little bit too low because I should have played Rapture. But thankfully I had a Paints Up and reacted for the Shaman because he was half health and targeted with the lightning attack. Would have killed him. Here's my Rapture, focusing on myself and the DPS first. So in a moment like this is a little like breather. It's always good to kind of scan what buffs you have available so you have a plan for the next Nova. I forget what I do next, but we have Vampiric Embrace, we have Fiend, Barrier, Shield the Druid, recast a Flash Heal, and I think I go for Vampiric Embrace. It's a nice one to get rolling. I immediately dot the Nova, Schism the Nova. Oh, I actually went for Shadow Fiend. Okay, so that's fine. Yep, and good reaction times there because the Druid was, I think, about half health and targeted with the single target attack. He used Bark Skin, we see outside of his frame. I gave him a life, a shield, and a Paints Up. Okay, and so for this one we have Barrier. It looks like PI is back available too. Let's see what I do here. Again, scanning my buffs to know what is available. Vampiric Embrace is still good to go. And in this little interim, it is a really good idea just to pump as much as you can. And there was a really well-timed PI on the Shaman. Shielded the Evoker on that single target attack. Instantly dot the Nova. Schism Vampiric Embrace the Nova. Mind Blast Penance. Yep, and that was really good timing there, so I was targeted. I shielded myself and hit my Fade Wall macro. Totally covered. Here's a pre-Rapture before the damage. I break for 1 global for a dot. And also really important in these Rapture phases, when someone's targeted with a single target, you need to give them a little bit extra love with that shield. And had a static clean go off, quick dispel, spelled D-I-S-P-E-L. They're not 2 L's. And here I just throw my last Shadow Covenant for the damage, because we will not need it for the Nova. And boom. So that was a really clean 24 Vortex Pinnacle on Tyrannical. I did already have it for the IO. This was more of just a run for funsies, and it ended up being a really good key for me to film and add to my channel. So I think in just a second here I pull up the meters so everyone can take a look. So again, this is running Aegis build, and this is also running with Rashok's Heart. Usually I would have a DPS trinket in its place, but it looks like I did almost 43,000 per second for damage, which is, I think, past my benchmark. I usually try to aim for 40. And it looks like my HPS overall was 104, which is nuts. And I think I'll pull up damage here. Yep, here we go. So dot is at the top, showing its importance to really keep that rolling always on all mobs. Then our shadow spells, Mind Blast, Dark Reprimand, Expiation, Shadow Word Death. Those are all really good spells for us to keep rolling and try and maximize. And here's a flash of the heals. So Atonement is always number 1. That's kind of just how it goes. Radiance and Shield are neck and neck second. And then here's a glance of my Molten Radiance for my trinket. It really doesn't do that much, neither does Vampiric Embrace, but it's kind of nice to have those things just when you need them. And also under 1 million for avoidable damage, which is right where you want to be. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in and supporting my channel. Please stay tuned in the upcoming weeks when the classes are more balanced. I'm going to try and have more videos coming out soon. And again, if anyone has been a supporter of my channel, or if I've helped you in any way over the years, I'd really appreciate to kind of meet me at my one ask of you guys. If you could go over to medify.gg/@justdiscipline and give me a vouch. It really wouldn't take but a second, and I would really like to get going on that website while it is still young and there are no other disc priests. So also, if you have any interest in learning from me one-on-one, you can also please submit a video to your YouTube channel, and I can review pieces of it for you, or you can pay me for it on medify.gg. So again, thanks everyone for tuning in, and until next time, Disc out.